Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Peripheral. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we have Charisse, which I think there's something really disturbing about the fact is she kind of uses the latest model of robot to bring back Daniel. And I do like, and I think it's interesting that it's not like a full-on Westworld thing of like, yeah, you couldn't even tell the difference. It's like, no, it's pretty clear. It's not like it's a full, like, skinned model like in a Westworld situation. It's pretty obvious, but the fact is, I guess it's just going through motions and just being like, right, just the feeling is all that matters. It's like, yeah, like, gotta adjust it, fix the way it walks, fix the way it talks, fix its pitch. Oh, you're too agreeable. Let's dial that back about 20%. Ooh, that's nice. It's just like, I don't know, something disturbing about, I mean, he was a good henchman, I guess, and you like this, you know, he proved to be competent in some regards, but it feels weird. I mean, especially considering you're the one that killed him. I mean, granted, you had no choice but to kill him because he was running. You didn't want to take the chance he gave Flynn and Wilf too much information, but still. So I just thought that was interesting, but obviously connecting the dots to Wilf and Lev, which we learned some very interesting things. We learned that in this world, there's basically this triangle of equilibrium, as Charisse kind of puts it, these three walls. One being the Klept. They're this oligarchy that basically, when the world was in chaos, they're the ones that used extreme violence to basically rein everything back in. But as, you know, Lev tries to explain, like, right, it isn't just that. Well, you brought that up, but there is something else with the Klept too. You strike at one, you strike at all of us. So there's that. We'll circle back to that. There's the Mets, the police. They allow because of what the Klepts did and just kind of regaining order in the way that they did, they are given a lot more leeway, and you can do whatever you want to, but the Mets are there to kind of be this equilibrium to make sure, hey, you don't step out of boundaries. And then the Research Institute kind of has its own role, and like it is this perfect balance of equilibrium to keep everything like, oh, you could stretch it to a certain degree, but we're all here to make sure the others doesn't fall out of place. Because she ends up referencing one particular Klept named Yuri. It's like, yeah, like, oh, you think like, oh, when something happens to you, the rest of the Klept, it's like, no. The Klept will sacrifice a limb kind of just to save the rest of the body type of situation. It's like, oh yeah, well, what happened to Yuri? Yeah, got a little bit of his DNA and basically sent a swarm after him. This swarm basically attacked anything with his DNA, which I'm like, was it Killjoys that had it? I think Killjoys had it, the show Killjoys. I think there was a particular weapon that did that too. Basically, it could seek out someone's DNA. This one seeked out, I think that's also the purpose of it in Killjoys too. If it was Killjoys, I remember there being like a bloodline eradicating weapon, if I remember correctly. It might have just been like specifically you could target someone from anywhere and be able to basically kill them if you have like their DNA or whatever. So in this case, it's like, cool, could wipe out an entire lineage of anyone that shared Yuri's DNA, so. And she ends up walking away with the teacup that Lev had. So it's like, cool. Better figure your shit out, because if you don't, I'm gonna eradicate you and your situation. Which is so fascinating because Wilf learns from Flynn that like she looked into Lev and it's like, yeah, my time like actually a few weeks ago, in fact, his entire family was brutally murdered. It's like kind of like a whole mafia thing. And then Wilf brought it to his attention, and he didn't seem to care. I'm like, why is he laughing? That seems weird. Apparently, he did it himself, because the Klept's main goal in all of this, why they've taken such an interest in what the Research Institute's looking into, why they needed a leader, it's all about the stub research, because they're trying to make a stub of their own. And it's like, oh, money can be made. And I was like, how the hell are you making, how do you benefit, how do you make money on an alternate timeline? I'm like, it didn't make sense to me, because I'm like, it won't, yeah, you could splinter off timelines, but it won't affect you. How would you? Oh, cool. It's a situation of, well, we can test stuff out. We have a literal pool of people that don't matter. I mean, because obviously the state of the world being as it is, but he references like, hey, I have this brother Alexi who has like a pharmaceutical company. It's like, yeah, he could use AI to test stuff out, but eventually the only way to really test it out is humans. But obviously there's all that that legal, moral red tape you have to go through when testing out drugs. I mean, you don't want to test it out and ends up killing a whole bunch of people. I mean, what? We could cut around that red tape with a stub, make our own stub, and then like, hey, we can test out the drug. Oh, it kills a whole bunch of people. Who cares? It's in an alternate timeline. It's not our timeline, so we don't have to suffer the ramification. I'm like, that's some diabolical shit. It's like, who cares? It's not our timeline, and it won't affect our history. And I mean, God forbid, whatever that timeline's future ends up being will be affected, but that's on them. I'm like, Jesus. He didn't go that far, but that's what the implication is. And so for him, it's like, oh, the nihilism of it all made me go like, no, I want to kill, like, I can only have only one version of me be out there. I'm like, so if every time you make a new stub, you're just going to kill I mean, you didn't just stop at you killed your entire family, your children too. I'm like, that's some sadistic shit. He's like, no, I didn't do it directly. I just hired the appropriate people in the timeline at that point in time in 2032 to have that happen. I'm like, still, homie, like, but I guess it's like, right, but that's not me. This is me, and I want this to be the only me, because they've only got access to this one stub currently, but it's like, I mean, I guess I could see, like, from a supervillain perspective, the implications of how you could use a stub, because once again, if you can constantly make stubs, you have an endless pool of, like, people you could just sacrifice to do whatever you want to. I mean, he said that's just one example of how it could be used. God forbid what other, like, examples of, like, how you go. I'm just like, that's some sadistic shit. Like, yeah, timelines, it's like, yeah, like, that's some, like, I don't know, it feels very Kang-ish. Yes, I gotta bring Marvel into it. But even then, it's like, well, at least Kang, the other versions of Kang are self-aware of each other. I mean, that's how the multiversal war started. But I'm like, you're murdering other versions of yourself because I guess you don't want to take the chance they get to where you are and decide to like, no, I want to be the only me in existence. This should be the only me, and this should be the only me profiting off of this. I guess it's like, right, the last thing you want is a stub version of you creating more stubs. It's like, let's kind of rein this in or something like that. I have no idea. Once again, for right now, Flynn's stub is the only one that we're aware of currently. I guess maybe like in this, branching timelines isn't as easy. Like, because you would think because, well, things have already changed because of interactions from the future, so they're not 100% going down the same route, but I guess the end results aren't big enough. Like, it probably has to be major swings that break everything to make an alternate timeline. Like, because, every choice would probably branch off into a new timeline in itself of like, oh yeah, this person, now that this person made a left here, well, that branches off in this timeline. It was like, well, they decide, well, now they have to choose whether to go right or left here. If they make another left, that's one timeline, and they go right, I don't know if it's going to be that intricate. Because they make it seem like this is the only stub, and maybe it's not, but maybe it's the only one they currently have access to, because maybe the Research Institute might have more access to it, and maybe that's what Elite Soul, not only like the means to make a stub, but be able to interact with very specific stubs type of thing. I don't know. So that was a whole interesting conversation. It's also, they made it pretty clear what Lev thinks of Wilf. It's like, oh, no, you're my, he's my pet. And Teresa's like, wait, that's how you think of Wilf? He was like, yeah, I'm very fond of my pets, more so than I am trusting of friends. So just thought that was kind of interesting. Like I said, kind of finally getting like a bigger picture of understanding of like how the world works in basically 2100 and just kind of the state of the world. We learn about it. I'll go ahead and talk about it. We learn how things got to where they were, as they keep referring to it as the jackpot. It's not just one thing. It is a multitude of things not happening all at once. It was a gradual buildup. It's just like a domino effect of this one thing happened, and this thing happened, and this thing happened, and then the world basically went to shit. It's like, why a jackpot? It's like, oh yeah, it's meant to be in a dark way. It's supposed to be humorous because it's better than just using the term apocalypse. So it's supposed to be just kind of a humorous way of dealing with it. It was basically an apocalypse. So, basically it started with a hack that wiped out like electricity in the no all the power the entire power grid in the U.S. And it was like that's like 7 years from Flynn's time because it's like in 2039, and so the way Ash kind of made it sounded like, oh, then it started happening in other places. So that was that. Then in like 2041, a pandemic happened. It was a brutal thing that it's like, yo, it attacks the liver, the spleen until basically your appendix is like, until like stuff fills up with blood to the point your abdomen burst or something like that. I was like, that sounds gnarly as hell. And I did like the representation of like the different points in the jackpot, like the different, because like even Ash is like, no one really knows when it started, because even now it's already kind of started by Flynn's time, so no one knows when things really officially kicked off. But these are some of like the major events, because the pandemic stuff, I believe it might not even been that, it might even been the third thing, which I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, which led to the most death. I don't think it was the pandemic. I don't think it was like the viruses and stuff. I do wonder about stuff like that. Does that like make, I mean, it's 2022. I mean, it's not like we're out of the COVID situation, but I wonder, does where we are currently make people feel at least a little bit better about that? I mean, granted, this story predates, I think this book came out in like 2014 or something, didn't it? The book that this is based on. I looked it up at the beginning of the season. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head now. Okay, so I was right. It was published in 2014. The end result ended up being droughts, famines, and stuff like that, and that's what ended up wiping out most of the population. It was over the course of like, as Ash put it, was like 4 decades. That's when like billions and billions of people died. Because we do have that thing. I want to say that was at the beginning, the whole Wilf and Alita when they were younger situation. And obviously, because there was that conversation that level. It's like, oh yeah, she doesn't have like her immunity implant, those implants or whatever. It's like, how long can she last without those? So I don't know if it's still that, what was it? The blood plague, as they called it. I don't know if that's still active. And that's what they kind of have immunity for. And she kind of removed the things that kind of help her with that. I don't know, because Lev is saying like, oh, we're going to find a dead body, but Wilf's kind of like, why would you kind of assume that? He's just like, with everything that's going on, like it just seems like, yeah, she's most likely going to be dead by the time you find her. So, but Wilf continues to rather wants to believe that she's still alive, because I don't think she'd do all that she's done without planning. So we get a little bit more of their time as children too, kind of like the whole living on the streets, surviving thing. And what the whole thing of like them sweeping the streets, I don't know whether that's like, once again, because they had touched on it previously when Wilf and Alita were adopted, about like the whole, oh, there's like, do they have like their like immunities or whatever? Like, I guess only like the rich had their immunities and stuff like that. But I guess they were just sweeping it and killing anyone that might be sick just so they don't spread it and it doesn't continue to mutate. I don't know. Like what that was about, like why they were specifically sweeping the streets and why the kids were trying like hell to avoid. We don't know what happened to the other two that they were with at the time, but we know about Alita and Wilf, obviously how it ultimately all ended up playing out for them. So, but obviously, a big part of this episode too is about Flynn's circumstances. Her condition has gotten worse. Specifically, Daniel told her last episode that like what it's like, oh, it's not just gonna be a game over situation. The trauma will leave a mark. And it's like, well, that's the thing. That's the interesting and crazy thing about the brain. It is a powerful tool. So, but even they're unclear about how this whole thing works. Because I was about to say, like, I would assume like your body's reacting by the fact is that this is happening to you and your body can't really process it and see it as any different. So, but apparently even Wilf is like, I don't know. None of us know for sure like what's really causing all this. And even for Flynn, it's like, wow, this might be the first time that you've ever not 100% lied to my, like that this is the first time I believe there's a 100% chance you didn't just lie to my face. Because every other time it's like any other conversation we have, I have to take it with a grain of salt, because I'm like, I know you're lying about something, whether you're omitting certain truths and stuff. But her condition is getting bad to the point, like obviously the hand thing is happening. Her eye starts like like getting super red at one point in time, and while she was arguing with Burton, like a bruise started popping up over her eyes, like ended up having a seizure. So they take her to the doctor to get examined. Everything seems legit. She seems okay, but like the fact is that the conditions that they're saying that she had, it's like it doesn't make sense for you to have that, especially because we see some signs of it in your body, but you seem healthy otherwise. It's like, well, it was some new sim headset. It's like, oh, what company is it? Let me get that information. Burton's apparently he's going to dance around that. So, turns out the person they went to see is Dee Dee, Tommy's fiance. So that's a whole complicated thing, because Burton kept kind of throwing that in her face because Tommy showed up. It's like, hey, I'm showing up here as a friend. And, she's like, right, we should probably tell him. It's like, the last thing we need to do is tell a cop. Because, yes, Tommy here is a friend, but eventually we start pointing out, like, hey, we got all these dead bodies here. Eventually Tommy's going to have to remember, oh, I'm a cop. I have to handle this the right way. So it's like, yeah, it might have been self-defense, but it's going to be a lot more trouble than it's worth. Because also she's a little more willing and trusting of Tommy because of everything. She's like, she even said in like the first episode, it's like, oh, like a 7th grade crush or something like that. But she kind of really went in on Burton because he kind of threw this whole thing in her face. But for her, it's like, yeah, I know it sucks what you and your pals saw over there, when you were enlisted, but you made that decision. And I'm the one that was stuck here taking care of mom when she was sick. I'm the one, yes, I had nothing. And so what did I do? Yes, I held on to a little bit of happiness. I held on to some like 7th grade crush. And I know it sounds stupid, but it was kind of probably like her only thing she really had to hold on to that was her own. Because every other aspect was like, right, holding down the fort while her brother was gone. And it's like now that he came back and their mom's situation being what it was just like, right, I would just, and the argument probably could be like, right, she probably let her life pass her by in the sense of had so many responsibilities. She probably didn't have too many opportunities just to live her life, so it probably reminds her of a time when things were good. I mean, this is probably someone that's a close friend of hers that she's always cared for her in this manner, but we'll ultimately see where things kind of go on that front. But Burton does apologize because he's like, man, literally hooking you up to a machine that gave you a seizure. We could start there, and I'm sure we could keep going until I run out of things to apologize. But it's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, look at mom. Mom's better, and she can see now. So is that something we should that should be apologized for? So it's just, I think what it comes down to is at the end of the day, like Burton wants to protect his family, and he just feels like he hasn't done a good job. It's like, especially because he feels some guilt because it's like, right, it was my decision to put you. I thought it was just a sim and stuff like that. So, but it doesn't change what you're going through. That I kind of put you in that headset. So it's like for him, the responsibility he feels on his part that it kind of falls on him. Especially because, she touched on it a little bit, because we don't know the ins and outs of it, but their dad died sometime afterwards, so that's why a lot of the responsibility, like, she had to hold down the fort while he was enlisted, and, she had to take care of her mom, and just, like I said, I think a lot of her life wasn't 100% her choice, 100% of she kind of made those choices, but it's also kind of like a lot of that responsibility fell on her shoulders, because, you deal with the cards you're dealt. You deal with the cards you're dealt type of situation. So I did love that Burton's like, right, we can't send Flynn back in there. And Leon's like, dude, you're making an excuse. You want to just go back in there. You just want to see it for yourself, like the future and stuff like that. It's like, that is pretty impressive. It's like, right, it's not time travel, it's data transfer, but it's like still being able to go not only to London, but London like 70-ish years into the future. That's pretty crazy, right? So it is that thing of, well, Burton admits, he's like, no, I do want to see it. And so Connor ends up being a tester at first, where it's like, oh, he's in Flynn's Peripheral. And so Will ended up contacting her about, like, right, we'll look into the headset and see if that's causing any issues. And he is open with her. He finally admits to her, like, tells her some truth about, hey, so I have a sister. And even admits later on, the woman that sent you on this whole rigmarole, who started all of this, Alita, that's my sister. So, and so I did like that Burton had his perspective on things about, like, he told Flynn, like, how she should handle it. She said, well, the reason why this, like, what you think you thought it was a sim at first, well, treat it like a sim. Like, how would you go about attacking the sim? And she's like, well, I do this and that, and, try to break the game, find out the rules of the game, and then, like, do the opposite of what I'm supposed to do. And what happens then? You probably die a lot. But then, you keep, testing the boundaries and stuff like that, and kind of, you set your own pace type of situation. So it's like, yeah, let's do that. You go in there, you get Connor and me a body. It's like, yeah, because I want to see the future, but we also need more boots on the ground. It's a lot for one person to handle. So eventually she kind of breaks away, and she, I love that she's got the guys back at the 3D printing shop. They're handling the hacking side of things. They're trying to stop it. So she's going to try and get whatever information she can on the outside world. And Ash had no choice but to kind of eventually tell her, it's like, right, she more only kind of has a right to know about what's happening, and about the whole Alita's line of like, right, you probably won't be here in 10 years. So I guess that's more so in conjunction with probably more specifically the blood plague, because that was 2041, so that would still be in that time range. I'm about to say, not unless she was specifically referencing like the month-long blackout in the U.S. and stuff. But it's like, oh yeah, and I actually forgot to talk about it too. Apparently there was also like a nuclear silo that got hit or something. Like there was some nuclear related shit that went off specifically in her hometown where she lived. So you're like, cool, that's not good. So it still ends up being the found ground zero for some stuff. Why specifically here? And maybe that also ties into why Alita specifically chose Flynn, because of just there's just so much connected to her, directly to her. Because even she told Burton about like the last episode when her and Wilf discovered Alita's place, and like the dioramas like she had of like them, like once again, like there's something special about all of this. Once again, she's got Burton and all his people, got the trailer, got that. I was like, I don't know if that's because this was something she was focusing on from the very beginning, like planning this out. Like once again, the fact is that it wasn't just like just because you had the affinity for this Burton, like maybe she always knew the end result was going to be like, oh no, it's not actually going to be Burton. She knew from the beginning it was Flynn. Maybe who knows what she knew at the time. But regardless of it all, Flynn hasn't told her brother and them the truth about what she discovered. I don't think she's going to tell them anytime soon, because it's like, cool, impending doom is it's all already in motion, and things are really going to hit a fever pitch. Well, one of many fever pitches in like just 7 years. So why kind of put that on their heads? Like, let's just kind of focus on now, and she'll keep that to herself until probably won't have a choice but to inform them of what's coming. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.